怎么看中国的。所以说，今天这个。
When there was the normalization of trade relations of China, we knew what was at stake: freedom and prosperity at home and in communities in China. So the commission was formed after that to monitor human rights and the development of the rule of law in China, etc. Because broken promises is the theme. Right from the start, at the time of Tiananmen Square, some of us came together and said, what leverage could we use to get the young people arrested at the time of Tiananmen Square free? What could we do to use our leverage that we had with the U.S. trade deficit to free those prisoners, to stop the proliferation of missile technology to Pakistan, which the Chinese were doing, and also to gain access to China's market? We thought with a $5 billion annual trade deficit, we were really had tremendous leverage. We worked very hard to stop the passage of the most favorable nation status for China, as it was then called. Mr. Wolf, at considerable risk to himself and to others, visited prisoners over and over again, brought home a record for us of prison labor products that we could demonstrate clearly that China was exporting to the United States, to make a case to the President of the United States, then President Bill Clinton, that China should, at the very least, shouldn't have most favored nation status, but they also, there could be some penalty. We said, treat these people like you would treat intellectual property. You would do some tariff adjustment on intellectual property, treat intellectuals and people the same way. Well, anyway, we failed. We passed the bill, House and Senate. President Clinton vetoed the bill. We couldn't override the veto in the Senate. We did pretty well, all things considered. But we have been rejected by Democratic and Republican presidents on this score. So our concern is bipartisan in terms of that. Senator, how are you? So at the time, though, my point is, at that time, right in the early 90s, the trade deficit was $5 billion a year. And we thought we had tremendous leverage, right? So they said to us, oh, you're all wrong. You have to let peaceful evolution take care of this. Human rights will emerge, et cetera, and we'll have access to China's market. Well, when we brought up the bill again in order to defeat us, they changed the name from most favored nation status to normalization or whatever they called it. But nonetheless, we still continued the fight. Well, a few years go by, nothing. The trade deficit continues to grow and grow and grow. And today, actually, rather than $5 billion a year, it's over $6 billion a week, almost $1 billion a day. That's what peaceful evolution brought us, and the coddling of China. Corp went into the WTO, which we tried to temper. A few years later, when I was Speaker, I visited China, was honored by the People's Congress, the President of the People's Congress, who's the second most important person in China. When he came to Washington, I reciprocated, not quite as elegantly as they did, not that many courses in the dinner, but that was the very day China was violating the WTO in terms of rubber exports to the United States. That very day was the announcement. So when he came to the Speaker's office and I was welcoming him, I said, I'm sorry to have to welcome you in a manner that is sort of a complaint, but China is not honoring WTO, and I can't let the opportunity go by without telling you that. And he said to me, as he conferred with his associates there, we were told when we joined the WTO that we did not have to honor that provision. I mean, China continued to proliferate missile technology, still has non-trade barriers to our products going to China, violates our intellectual property rights. In any event, they've promised to do this, they promised to do that, they haven't done it. I think China is a very important country in the world. It's going to be successful. We rejoice in that success, but so much of it is at our expense. All that trade deficit going to China enabled them to have the foreign exchange that enabled them to buy into economies by political support in the rest of the world. We chose to ride a tiger, and the tiger will decide when we get off. And it has curtailed the ability of America to talk about human rights in China because the corporate interests are so great. But I say, if we do not, if we hesitate to speak out for human rights in China because of commercial interest, we lose all moral authority to speak out for human rights any place in the world. So this is about who we are as a nation, our values, trade, our workers, political power, geopolitical